On today's Locked On Texan podcast, quick news for the Houston Texans, and B. Scott joins the show discussing OTAs and the Houston Texan practice. But of course, Cody, let's start the show.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, everybody, to a Tuesday edition of the Locked On Texan podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Johnson Sports Guy Hickman, joined by none other than Cody Davis. And this Friday, I'm getting promoted to fiance from husband. Okay, I'm super excited. Hey, guys, if y'all want to look out and buy anything in a registry or whatever, feel free to do that. Feel free. But today, you guys ain't coming here to talk about love. Y'all came to talk about the Houston Texans, at least to hear about the Houston Texans. And speaking of promotions, I'm getting promoted to fiance, to husband. The Texans have promoted Ronnie Mcgill to director of player personnel. This is according to Aaron Wilson of Pro Football Network. Mcgill followed general manager Nick Collins from the Patriots, taking the job in Houston when he was previously a pro scout for the New England Patriots. This move follows the departure of Matt Bezergan, who recently left Houston for the Buffalo Bills as a senior personnel executive earlier this offseason. So shout out to Ronnie Mcgill, put in that work. Now he's getting that promotion, and the offseason has been filled with a tornado of ups and downs for the Houston Texans. And by the way, we talked about what is the Houston Texans' best move. It's undoubtedly moving on and trading Deshaun Watson, right? And this is for my boy, Darrell, coaches over at Westlake Middle School. He's a great guy, man. Great guy. I want y'all to know that no matter what happens with Deshaun Watson, them picks that we got back here in Houston, they ain't going nowhere, Cody.
Yeah.
They ain't leaving.
Yeah, I saw a report. They were saying something about the Cleveland Browns are still all in on Deshaun and that they have no interest in voiding the trade. I'm like,
yeah.
How is that going to work? Like,
yeah, don't matter how it's going to work for them. We just know here in Houston, there's no worry that those next two first-round picks and the other picks that came with that trade, they're not going to be rescinded. They're staying in Houston until further notice. Another big news of the offseason was the absence of Laremy Tunsil from OTAs. And Laremy Tunsil, who, by the way, donated a state-of-the-art digital scoreboard to his high school in Florida, Lake City, Columbia. It has been confirmed that he will be at the mandatory minicamp this week. And do you want to clap for that, Cody? Or
no, I'm going to act surprised. He's going to be here? Oh,
he's
my God.
Wow. Shout out to my boy John Crumpler, who, by the way, writes for the Texas Wire. He's another great guy. He wrote an article when we talked about it on Twitter in the DMs. It's kind of like, why are we overblowing this? And I thought to myself, maybe it's because Brandon Cooks, who is a 7-8-year vet in the league, showed up to not many camps, voluntary OTAs, was around, showed that presence, showed that leadership. And guys, I just want to say this. Laremy Tunsil is still a great player. Laremy Tunsil, I think, is still a top 10 tackle in the NFL. Some players are great players and great leaders. Then you have some players are great players, and then they go home. Laremy Tunsil is a player that's a great player. The expectations of everything that came with the initial trade and that contract that was given out to him a couple of years ago, you guys got to stop making it up in your head. We know when he gets on the football field that the offensive line will be better. That's his job. He's going to do that and go home. But, Cody, he will be at minicamp this week. Mandatory mini camps. What are your feelings about that?
I have no feelings because first and foremost, it's something that we already knew, and this is something that we already talked about here on this show. Because first and foremost, I think the biggest difference in terms of the first 3 weeks of the off-season workouts versus the workouts that's about to starting today, as a matter of fact, is one word. One was voluntary and the other one is mandatory. And the one that is starting today at NRG Stadium that I will be a part of, it's mandatory. And I think a lot of people still are a little bit hesitant to believe that this is a man who actually came to peace with the organization. Because remember, towards the end of last season, it was a big deal. It was a big question on whether or not Laremy Tunsil is going to be a part of this organization moving forward. Prior to the draft, we started hearing trade rumors. We started hearing that this team was interested in getting their hands on Laremy Tunsil. We even here on this show was breaking down what's the possibility that the Texans can have 3 first-round draft picks if they can move on from Laremy Tunsil. But Nick Caserio, in the interview he did a couple weeks ago on Sports Radio 610, he came out and said that he sat down with Laremy Tunsil along with Lovie Smith that worked out their differences, and he actually has a great relationship with this organization moving forward. And the biggest example I can give to that is it's not like the Texans were caught off guard that Laremy Tunsil was not at voluntary workouts. No, he actually called them ahead of time and told them, this is the deal, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I already have scheduled with my family. And what did the Houston Texans say, i.e. Lovie Smith and Nick Caserio, the 2 most important people inside NRG Stadium? They said okay. Right. So, look, I think more so it was just a major talking point. I think a lot of us got to get out we just got to get out the mindset that, 1, the Houston Texans are no longer a laughing stock, and 2, for the first time, it's okay to speak positive about this organization.
Yeah, and I also would like to add that people who are in the working world, Cody, I'll ask you this question, and you guys can respond on Twitter or in the YouTube comments. Make sure you are subscribing to the Locked On Texans podcast on YouTube. If it's your work day, and let's say you went out the night before, party a little too hard, and forgot to set your alarm, and you oversleep, and your job calls you, and it's your day to work, you're gonna jump up. I'm sorry, whatever. Make an excuse. Overslept. My dog ate my phone. Whatever. You're gonna put your clothes on, brush your teeth, take a shower, whatever the case is, and you're gonna get to work. What if it's your off day and you're chilling, and your job calls you and say, "Hey, we need for you to come in. We're a little short." How many of y'all are really gonna volunteer to go to work? Especially if you had already told them, you know what, I need a mental health week. You know what, I'm going out of town. You know what, I got other things I want to do. You know what, I just don't feel like being there right now. I already got paid. Yeah. So on a lower scale, let's put ourselves in those shoes. But with Laremy Tunsil returning to the Houston Texans offensive line, that will bring some much-needed cohesiveness, which is great for running backs like Marlon Mack and Damien Pierce. And speaking of Damien Pierce, shout out to D. Pierce. Hey, man, the Houston Texans overpaid him a little bit. They looked out, gave him a little lunch money, extra $25K, which actually made it harder for other fourth-rounders to get their contracts. Because of that, Houston paid him an extra $25,000, which I think is a great gesture. He is moving from Florida all the way to Houston, which Stingley is coming from Louisiana. Everybody's coming from somewhere. So, but that's great for Houston and Damien Pierce. Of the first 15 players drafted in the fourth round, Pierce was the only one to open up and get that rookie contract signed. So, again, kudos to Houston, doing right by their players. D. Pierce at an extra $25K. If you come across this show, you can help out with this wedding. That's what you can do. But we got a lot to talk about today. Brandon K. Scott, OTAs. Oh, my gosh, it's so good to be back. You know, at BlueNow.com, you can celebrate all of life's special moments, from creating the custom engagement ring of her dreams to gifting a classic and timeless jewelry piece, all at a price you won't find at a traditional jeweler. Whether you are ready to pop the question, like I was a couple years ago, and my wedding is this Friday, but whether you are ready to pop the question or you're celebrating a milestone moment, find jewelry as unique as her, like I did, with the most modern convenience of online shopping at BlueNow.com. What do I like about BlueNile.com, Cody? Well, I love the fact that no matter what I'm looking for, Blue Nile has jewelry experts available on hand 24/7. So make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Texans listeners get $50 off purchases of 500 or more. Use promo code Locked On. That's promo code Locked On. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in a discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever peace. Go to BlueNile.com. The Ultimate NBA Mock Draft starts June 16th. With over 50 NBA insiders, nothing equals Ultimate NBA Mock Draft. The Locked On NBA Big Board Draft experts plus Odyssey insiders. First pick is June 16th. Search Ultimate NBA Mock Draft and follow now so you don't miss a pick. Brandon K. Scott of 610 Sports Radio, the B Block Podcast, the cousin that we all want and need in our lives. He is back joining the Locked On Texan podcast to talk about OTAs, and we want to dive into the rookies. I think, Cody, stop me if I'm wrong. Brandon, you can stop me as well. The biggest stories for the Houston Texans, of course, aside from moving on from Deshaun Watson, has been this 2022 draft class and the expectations that has been set before them. And so, of course, we know that John Mechie hasn't really been out there. Derek Stingley Jr. hasn't really been out there. But we still have Christian Harris, who's running with some of the ones. Thomas Booker, who's been getting a lot of love. And by the way, I've never seen a man's leg that big, pause. And Damien Pierce, who we talked about earlier, has gotten an extra $25K from the Houston Texans. Austin Deckles. When you look at this 2022 draft class, has there been a player that has tremendously stood out from the rest of everybody else, as a rookie at least?
Yeah, I think a couple of them. I would say out of the rookies that Jalen Petrie has probably stood out the most. I would twist it a little bit back on you and say that what stands out to me most is that the two guys I expect to contribute the most to the team eventually are the ones that haven't really been participating a lot. And that is Derek Stingley on the one side and John Mechie on the other. So I feel like there's still sort of this excitement and anticipation on the fact that, look, you knew going in that these guys had injuries. You know, I didn't think it was really necessary even going in to freak out about Stingley even. You know, as long as he's at least able to go and train in camp and ultimately, you know, able to go and be healthy during the season. And there's a much longer play than that, right? Than even just this season. So you want to play it right and play it smart. But to me, the big thing that stands out is that the two guys that are probably, you know, if you had to say going to be the best defensive player out of all the guys that were picked, you know, there's a case for Jalen Petrie, and he's certainly the one that, like I mentioned, that stood out of the guys that have participated. But if you're going to make an argument for who's got the highest upside, it's Stingley, obviously, for a reason. You know, he was picked number 3 overall for a reason. And I think Mechie, I think we talked about this before, guys, like the potential that he has as a guy, you know, with the ball in his hands after the catch, yards after the catch. Just being a sort of a tougher player, a more reliable option, I think, out of the slot, something that they haven't had, I feel like, in years, really. It's as far as like a reliable guy, right? So whenever he gets right, whenever he's able to go, you know, what stands out to me is that your best guys on both sides of the ball are the ones that you're being really careful with and that haven't really seen the field. But of the ones that we have seen, like you mentioned, Thomas Booker. I never feel like I was on with you guys before and mentioned Thomas Booker that the first time that I laid eyes on him, it struck me like how not just how big he was, but how he was built. You know, like I had seen him before in a Zoom, you know, the day that they drafted him, and just I guess I just had a different vision for what I was going to see. And even looking at his film, you know, in college, like to me, it almost felt like a totally different body type than what I was expecting or anticipating when I saw him. And I think he can be a really interesting player. Like, you know, it is hard to read, especially guys up front, right? Because they're not doing that kind of thing, right? You can look at some of these skill guys and see how explosive they look, and the quarterbacks obviously, and think about that. But with the guys up front, you know, you're just kind of looking at their bodies, trying to see what kind of shape they're in, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty once, you know, mandatory camp starts, and you know, which is this week obviously, and then ultimately in training camp.
I would like to say, Cody, before I pass it off to you, I think Thomas Booker is built like an MCU character with CGI in real life, though. Like, we didn't need any extra digital additions. That dude is built for
Yeah.
tough.
Oh,
So
he could be an Avenger. Like
he could be an Avenger. He could be from
he
Sam
he.
and Winter Soldier. Remember the original Avenger before it
Oh
came?
yeah. Yeah,
He
right.
could be
Right.
that guy.
Yeah, he would. He would obviously need some type of superpower. You know, he'd have to be able to fly or be able to do something with one of them Infinity Stones or something. You know, but as far as like from a build, like he's Hulk-ish. You know, Thor-ish. You know, he's big and built like that.
Brandon, I'm glad that you started evaluating the 2022 draft class by looking at Derek Stingley, a guy that we have yet to really see get on the field and showcase what he was able to do. You've been out there along with myself doing rookie training camp, doing voluntary OTAs, and outside of stretching and running a few drills and walkthroughs, we still haven't seen Derek Stingley go out there and play, especially when the team start going 11 on 11. I want to get your opinion on this because this is something that John and myself kind of played around with last week, but do you have some type of concern or getting the sense that Stingley might not be ready to take the helm as this team's number one cornerback, just given the fact that he is still recovering from that foot injury that limited him to 3 games last year at LSU?
Yeah, I think it's possible. I wouldn't call it a concern though. Like for me, you know, I think it's probably if there's anything concerning about it, it might be that maybe you were expecting, like based on what the narrative was, you know, going back to March when, you know, during lion season, right? During draft season, there seemed to be kind of this feeling, I forget the exact quotes and words that they used, but there seemed to be this feeling that he would be maybe ready to go before that. But I'll say this though, when they signed Fabian Moreau, I'm just curious on what y'all think about this. Like when they signed Fabian Moreau, like I thought that like two sides on that. Like yeah, he's in there competing with, like they didn't give him a lot of money or anything like they did give a nice little piece of money to Steven Nelson, but ultimately those are the guys he's competing with, Steven Nelson and the guys that were already there. But as a guy who started before in the league, is he also possibly insurance for that very idea? You know, a low cost guy with some starter experience who, you know, worst come to worst of Stingley, not just maybe it's not just the health, but like the overall readiness isn't there, like to just like really just do the grind of a season, you know, or if they got to kind of ease him in there and maybe he's the reserve to start, like we got this vision of him being number 3 overall pick. He's got to start immediately, which ideally, yeah, he does, but because of the injury, you know, what if Moreau is also like, or any number of these guys? I just use him as an example because that's somebody that they signed seemingly sort of late in the game, and you know, makes you think like, okay, starter experience, not a lot of money, you know, cost benefit analysis right there. Didn't cost a lot. Is that you know, some insurance for if Stingley's not ready to go early on? So I think it's definitely a possibility. You know, I'm not going to minimize it as like if you wanted to be concerned, like if you are concerned or anyone else is concerned, I'm not going to minimize it. I'll say I'm not concerned necessarily unless, you know, you get some more information about, you know, there's more damage to the foot than we realize, or he's got to have an extra procedure, or you know, if this thing starts to linger, the more I say this, the more it lingers, the more concerning it becomes, obviously.
BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your betting stats and sports information. Find all of the sports developments, news, and league reviews, including this year's basketball championship matchup, the NHL hockey conference finals, Major League Baseball, and of course, all of the latest fighting news from MMA, UFC, down to boxing. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about all of the latest action and trends at BetOnline, because BetOnline is where the game starts. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers out there. Thank you for checking out today's show. Of course, we are joined by Brandon Scott from the B Block Podcast and Sports Radio 610. We just talked about the rookies, the 2022 draft class. The 2021 draft class will play a very important role for this Houston Texan team. And we talked about Thomas Booker, who has fans have really kind of just fell in love with his physique, right? We just talked about it, kind of built him up a little bit. However, have we forgotten about Roy Lopez already? Second-year man out of Arizona, played well for Houston last year. I thought for the majority of the year he was the best rookie for Houston because of how consistent he was. How important is Roy Lopez for year two, and how has he looked in OTAs?
Yeah, I think the thing that stood out about Roy since we first saw him coming back was that he has slimmed down, and it's not to say that he wasn't in good shape last year, but he just looks like he's in better shape now, and that could just come from, a year being a pro and, kind of a year being able to self-evaluate yourself as a pro, after a year. But yeah, no, he's stood out more. So again, like I said, the guys up front, it's hard to really say what, what's what before they really start getting there and really kind of hitting. But I think just physically he looks a lot different. And I wouldn't say anybody's forgotten about him because I mean he was like you say, I don't know about the necessarily the best rookie, but most consistent rookie would probably be a better way, like how you described it, and that's just because he played the most, or maybe started more than most, and so got that experience in there, and honestly, seemed to be the most kind of ready made when he got there, like his strength translated immediately. It seemed like got some football intelligence about him that translated. A lot has been made about his wrestling background. That seems to help him in certain ways on the defensive line. So I would say, far from forgotten about him, there's more so really, and we don't talk about it a lot, but really more so an expectation that he take a step or that he kind of be maybe a mainstay in there on the interior defensive line right there with Malik Collins, who they paid, and who and then Roy Lopez, who they got on the cheap, to be quite honest. And then, if anything, you look more on the side of like Ross Blacklock, right? I know we're talking about the class,
Talked about that on Twitter too.
Right, and we're talking about the second year guys, but how about the third year guys, right? As well, like this is like an inflection point. You're expecting Jonathan Grenard, who's picked after Ross Blacklock, to be this significant contributor like he was last year when he was healthy, and then. Where does that leave Ross Blacklock between Lopez and Thomas Booker and Malik Collins and everything else that they're doing on, along those lines? So, I think it's an interesting spot from even from that angle. And far from forgetting about Roy Lopez, there's an expectation that he's going to play well for you.
You talked about Roy Lopez. How has the rest of this sophomore class looked to you,
Right.
mainly outside of Davis Mills, especially when you take a look at it and has evaluate the talents of Brevin Jordan and Nico Collins?
Yeah, no, I mean, Cody, like I would even include Davis Mills in the group, man. I'm not even hating on Davis Mills, and I'm cool with the situation.
He's more than I.
That's not what I said. I said I'm not hating, okay. How about this? Am I with it?
Okay.
He's all right, and I'm all right with it. Okay, and I'm also willing to be like wrong about this. I'm not like married to an opinion and like sitting up here telling you that I know more than anybody than the next man. Like or that can't be wrong. Like the dude could be the GOAT. Could you call him Cody the baby GOAT?
You know it. That's my nickname, baby goat.
That is what Cody said.
Baby goat.
Okay.
Baby goat.
And decisions of.
Hey, put it like this: he ain't got
maybe
much
he
to
is.
do. He ain't got much to do to become the GOAT in Texans history.
Yeah. Ooh, that's his own episode, ain't it?
That's a
Hey,
shot.
that's his own think piece, Cody. But to your point though, and the second year guys, like I would include Davis Mills in that group. All of them are third rounders and under, right? So like house money, the whole class is house money to me. And to that point, Like Davis Mills is your starting quarterback. Start to go like I think it's important to start there. Honestly, like a dude that you picked in the third round is possibly far more talented than that and could be, even if forget whether I think he could be great, could legitimately be your starting quarterback for, the next couple of years. And then past that, you got Nico Collins, who you gave up some picks to get, who looks good in camp, by the way. Looks really good in camp, I think, physically. And I think just straight up, as far as options that they got, this is a hell of an opportunity for him. Like, forget how he looks in camp. That's a dude that they drafted last year, and he physically is different from most of the guys that's out there. He gonna have an opportunity to play, quite just period, hard stop. So let's go Nico Collins and make the most of this opportunity for you being on a team that don't have a lot of weapons offensively. Like he can be a guy, right? And then getting a Brevin Jordan. I don't know if one of you guys just mentioned him a minute ago,
By the way,
but
John Harris wrote about the importance of the tight end group this year. Of
yes,
course, Brevin Jordan was mentioned. Talked
yes,
about how Houston has, struggled to find a solid tight end
yes.
since CJ Fedor's had to retire. And before you hop into him, I am of the belief, this is my own comparison, not saying that this will be him at his height of what he
Hmm.
can be, but I think that Brevin Jordan can be Jimmy Graham esque in
Ooh.
terms of his speed, his length, the way he's able to jump. So I just wanted to mention that. I do think this is a big year. Well, Brevin Jordan can have a big year this upcoming year.
Ooh, yeah. Jimmy Graham at his height though, I mean, and at his best
No,
was
I'm not saying he can replicate that at his best, but I do see some similarities in
I'm with
how
you.
he plays.
Well, and also how he'll be used and what the
Use yeah.
expectation to him will be as well, right? Like Jimmy Graham, for as amazing as he was, nobody ever thought of him as like a blocking tight end, right?
Not
Like,
at all. All verticals.
right, and you would think maybe he could do that as far as much of a physical freak as he was, right? You would like think, man, this dude could do anything, right? But he wasn't that. And Brevin, out the only thing that only part, really only main part I would knock on on that comparison would just be the size. Like he's just not quite as big as that or as tall as that. But I do think it's an interesting point on just as far as how he'll be used, what the expectation will be of him, and back to that to the point of the tight ends and John Harris's piece on the tight ends and all of that. Like, I think that that's a huge question mark for the team going into the year, man. Right? Like, I think that's an enormous question mark, and not to say that there's like this enormous cloud or question about Brevin Jordan just being a second year player, and I think a guy who's got a little bit of expectation on him and maybe some hope around them. But just overall, the position group, I think, vastly underperformed last year, right? Don't talk about it a lot, but I think they underperformed, and I don't think feel like they did a whole lot to address it to make the position better. So like you are expecting better play from guys that were basically here last year. I mean, other than the drafting of Tegan Cotoriano, and you signed Seth Green from U of H as an undrafted free agent. They waived uh, Daryl Daniels or
Right.
just last week, and I'm trying to remember if they signed another tight end to replace him. But either way, like it's just a hodgepodge of dudes that either were here last year and were either young in Brevin Jordan's case or underperform in Farrell Brown's case, or as a guy you know what you're gonna get out of an Anthony Auclair who is really almost solely a blocking tight end, with the exception of one game that he had last year. But I mean, you kind of know what's up, but want more out of that position, and so you're really looking at Brevin Jordan as like to be that guy. At least from a pass catching standpoint, and hopefully Farrell Brown, who was again, you talk about guys who get off the bus and just look the part like Thomas Booker we were talking about earlier. Farrell Brown is along those lines as we know. So if he can just be big, be a humongous human, and behave like it, like play like it, you know, you you're getting a lot out of that too, and that's something that he struggled with, I think, with health last year, like just staying healthy and being able to be consistent. Um, so for me, enormous question mark on the tight end position because I don't see a lot there based off of what we've seen already. but but you're hopeful, and I do like Brevin Jordan. And we mentioned Roy Lopez again being a guy who's already been a big contributor. But Garrett Wallow, dog, like man, you hear Nick Caserio talk about Garrett Wallow. Nick Caserio doesn't really praise players like effusively too often, but he spoke highly last week of Garrett Wallow and him being one of the guys that came that just looks the most different as a player in terms of improvement from the time they got there in the spring to like now going into mandatory camp. You know, a guy that's learned all of the linebacker positions and and looking at physically, you could see how maybe he could be capable if he, got himself you know, got himself right, like having some experience in the league and everything. After a year, getting a little bit stronger, but athletically being able to at least adequately play all of the linebacker positions, specifically in this system. So, that's a whole nother interesting angle, man. Think about that, John Cody, the linebackers, right? Garrett Wallow coming back, Nick Caserio talking about him being improved. There's house money right there, a later round pick. And you just added Christian
And
Harris in
Wallow
the
can
draft.
cover his ass off. By the
That's
way,
there we
I
go.
would like
He
to
was.
say
I
that
mean, I mean, he was a
he was a
safe. I think
safety at
that's
one
something. He
point.
played safety at one point, as did Christian Harris. So
Hmm.
notice what they're doing with the
And
linebackers,
corner.
fellas. Right, right, exactly, right. But like DB mentality or DB background and skill set. Notice what they're doing with the linebackers. You know how they talk about the evolution of Lovie Smith's defense, how you know he can't play as much cover two. They got to play more man, and but the corners got to be able to play. You got to go get cover two corners, and like that whole conversation. Well, you know what I feel is lost about it, especially after you look at how the Texans went about these last couple of drafts under Lovey Smith type defenses, is they went and drafted some linebackers with some DB backgrounds
Yeah.
Hmm.
and really are speaking to without saying to you out loud. They're really telling you what the evolution of the Lovey Smith defense really is, and that's that the linebacker just looks different. The linebacker doesn't look like Derek Brooks or Brian Urlacher. Like they don't look like that. They don't you know that's the evolution of the Lovey Smith defense. I feel like, and it's more or less so about Lovey and his defense, and more so about the game and what you're asking guys to do. Both as like sort of in a traditional sense as a linebacker, but also in the middle of the field and coverage, and all of the various different responsibilities that the linebackers have that we don't even really know about, right? The things that we don't see necessarily without being in the room. So, but to me, they tell you a lot in the type of guys that they went to go get. And so, with that, Garrett Wallow being a second year guy and Christian Harris being a rookie, like we talked about earlier, being two guys I'm semi excited about and intrigued to watch play this year.
Brandon, last question before getting out of here. And there's a lot more I want to discuss, but I'm going to save it for next week when we have an opportunity to see the entire roster because
Mandatories.
it's mandatory now. I don't know if
Yeah,
you heard, but
yeah,
Laramie Tunsil is coming back. Oh, what a
yeah,
surprise.
yeah. He punched the
But
clock. Yeah,
exactly,
Laramie is gonna
Laramie
punch
is
the clock.
back.
You
But
know how it goes.
Brandon, last question before getting out of here. Just really quick, what has been your thoughts about the improvements that you have been seeing in the Texans' run game, especially with the addition of Marlon Mack?
Yeah, so the Marlon Mack thing is really interesting, isn't it? Like
Mm-hmm.
I
like
think it
because
is.
you just have no idea like the range of potential here, guys.
I think it's. I think. I think it's
Yeah,
very interesting. If he's able to play 14 games,
yeah. Well, yeah, man. If he's able to play 14 games, the expectation is that he's healthy and. Well, and then the question there is he the same player, right? And we just didn't
He
get to
sure
really see
look
him a
it.
lot, right now,
Yeah,
and
right
and that
now without pads. I want to admit without pads.
but it is like the point I was making before about the guys up front. In the trenches, you can't really make a lot of what you see there, other than just the fact that they out there and see what kind of shape you think they in. But you can see when a dude running fast. You're like, hey, especially
Hmm.
when you standing right there, like that's not hard to understand. So you're like, okay, he running fast. You know what I mean? But you hadn't seen him a lot in like actual football in a while. So what I was saying is that the range, man, the range of possibilities. We talking about boom or bust potential, and of course somewhere in between. And you probably would take somewhere in between, and would hope it would, you know, be toward the ledger of good and not like what you saw last year of the type of retread running backs you brought in here, right?
Mhm.
So, man, he's looked good in camp, right? Yeah, you seen him, Cody. Like he looks the part right now, but the real question will be, how durable is he still, and is he actually still that same player that he was a couple of years ago? You can make it a reasonable excuse or rationale for why he might be playing behind the guys that he was playing behind in Indianapolis, but I don't know if that would necessarily be the case here. Like he should be able to beat out a Rex Burkhead if he's healthy. And quite honestly, I know a lot of us. I'll speak for myself. I know I want to see a lot of Damien Pierce this year. I want to see a lot of
Mhm.
Damien Pierce, period. But logically speaking, you would think if he's healthy and if he's the player he was, he should be able to be out the Damien Pierce as well. I'm talking about the Marlon Mack that we saw, a couple of years ago before the injury. So I mean, I think it's interesting. It's obviously got to be a lot better, man. Because woo, man, when I tell you I ain't never seen a running game like beyond like high school ball, like credible football, a running game that bad. I've never seen it in my life. In my life, the last couple of years that we've seen.
It's
So
been it's
like I'm
historically
I,
bad, by the way.
I almost feel like it can be worse. You know what I mean? Like, man, maybe and knock on wood, like knock on wood when I say that, like I'm not trying to put no hex on nobody, but you feel like it can't be worse, right? Like it's gotta be
We said
it
that
can't
two
be
years
worse than
ago, and it
that.
was worse.
It was.
It was
It
worse.
was.
Well,
So
the
it
To your
run
can be.
game
Marlon
wasn't.
Mack point, I would like to add that I think his biggest question mark will just be centered around durability because Marlon Mack was never a shifty or running back where he needed a lot of cuts to make a play and make more. He was always been more of a downhill.
Yep.
I'm going to get the ball. I'm going to run straight forward. I'm going to fall forward for at least 4 yards. He's never did a lot of the acrobatical, scat back type of running back stuff. So I think if he's healthy, then I would wonder if Houston leans on him more often, especially earlier in the season, than compared to a more duo type of backfield where they're getting a 55-45 split of the carries.
Yeah, well, but I mean, first of all, that's an interesting point you make about him being downhill because you are correct. And it just made me think about the fact that all of the guys that they got right now. I mean, I know that Rex Burkhead has some shiftiness to him, but he's at least with, he is. If the assignment is like if his power, like just put your head down and go, he'll do that too. Like Rex Burkhead for what he is a really solid backup type of running back. You know what I mean? Or mix it in a kind of committee thing. So like when you talk about the top two guys being Marlon Mack and Damian Pierce, they are both that. Like they are both exactly
Yeah,
what
downhill.
what you described, downhill guys. And honestly, man, like I wouldn't even want like I think the ideal situation. I put it to you this way: ideal situation is that Marlon Mack is healthy and Damian Pierce is exactly what we think he is, a solid downhill back. And you do have a committee there mixed in with Rex Burkhead, whereas Rex Burkhead is not your best running back. That's absurd. But he is in the mix, and you are relying more on a healthy Marlon Mack who is true to his identity, still downhill type of guy with some bursts, again what we've seen right at camp, and then Damian Pierce again, kind of just living up to the expectation of hey, you ain't got to go out there and be you ain't got to go out there and be Jonathan Taylor or anything like that. Like you go out there and be you, and we got a committee in this thing. You got Marlon Mack got your back, Rex Burkhead got your back. This offensive line, the dudes on the offensive line actually play the positions that we got them at. So everything is normal. That's an actual left guard, so you can trust that left guard. That's an actual right tackle. You can trust that right tackle, and however the scheme and system work out, everybody know they role. That's what I say that about the offense too. Like they got guys especially I was kind of sarcastic about the offensive line point, but think about it. Like everybody is now like got clear defined roles, and like everything seems a lot simpler and more straightforward, and like it just makes sense. Like, okay, Pep Hamilton, this is gonna be like, they're gonna have, this is gonna be like a power run scheme. A lot, you're gonna see a lot of that, and it'll be interesting to see how many chances Davis Mills is able to take downfield, especially considering we don't know a whole lot about the weapons, right? Like we know Brandon Cooks, but beyond that, okay, what is Nico Collins in year two? What are these guys really? But as far as the run game, you're like, okay, the offensive line feel like it's just gonna be simple and sensible, and so the run scheme is gonna be simple and sensible, and the running backs can just hit the hole, and then you got running backs that will hopefully have the vision and we know have the attitude of, again, like John said, downhill, I'm gonna hit the hole, and we're gonna at the very least fall forward for three, and hopefully I knock a sun gun down too in the process, right? Like you don't feel like you got guys that, you know, and I say that as a skinny dude. I'm talking about running backs, right? Though, like you got guys you feel like gonna do that, right? Between Damien Pierce and Marlon Mack, again, if he's healthy, and even Rex Burkhead to a smaller degree.
Brandon K. Scott from Sports Radio 16. Brandon, really quick, where can our listeners follow you at on social media? And don't forget to tell them about the B Block Podcast.
Yeah, man, at Brandon K. Scott on Twitter, at B Scott from Hiram Clark. Of course, the E at the end from Houston, you know that, on Instagram. And then the B Block Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, and of course, I'm over at Sports Radio 16. I'm gonna be doing some radio too, y'all. So y'all catch the podcast and y'all catch the some of these live shows I'm gonna be doing. When's my next one? I think I'm in for Ron the Show Hughley on Friday. I just did a show with him last Friday at one of our remotes out in, was it where were we at? Tomball or
Yeah, I was in Tomball.
Tomball.
And so we were in Tomball last Friday, me and Ron. I'm gonna be with Clint. And I ain't gonna even lie to y'all. I'm not 100% sure where we're gonna be at on Friday, but we're gonna be somewhere. And so follow us on social media to find out. And if you can't make it out there, just listen to us at Sports Radio on Sports Radio 610 from 2 to 6. And there'll be some more radio too after that the following week. So we are doing it big this summer, man.
One thing about it, that work don't stop.
No sir, no sir, not at all. I rather have the work. Yeah, I was gonna say I'd rather have the work than not, for sure.
Absolutely, especially with gas prices looking crazy. I'm John, some sports guy Hickman. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Locked On Texans. Follow me on Twitter at John_Hickman12, and make sure you are subscribing to the Locked On Texans podcast on YouTube. Comment, share, tell a friend, and tell his grandmother at church to put us on the prayer list so everybody else can know who we are. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Cody, where you at?
As always, you can follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, it's Cody, COTYDAVIS_24. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.